Hey, welcome everyone to a Friday afternoon for a change rather than a Wednesday. This is episode 4 of the Data Mix. My name is Brian Boudin, and on my screen on this side, yes, I got my pointing right. I've got my co-host George Beaton. How are you today, George?
I'm good. I'm just getting my pointing right as well. And there is
Yes,
Brian.
yes, we got it wrong the last time. We ended up pointing this way and that way, and it's all gone to pot. So, how are things with you today, George? I gather
What
that you've had a rather exciting week, shall we say?
it's been a mad week, an exhilarating week. I am just fresh back from a week on the River Spey, as in canoeing down the River Spey in an open canoe. Got pretty wet. Fell out a few times. Wild camped.
Few
Didn't catch
times,
any
yeah,
fish.
okay, yeah, we'll take a few
Fantastic.
times. Yeah.
Fantastic. And still haven't shaved. Still in the thick of it.
Well, that's all right. That's all right. That's the whole point of going on holiday, right? You don't have to. You just get that big beardy thing going on, and you don't have to worry about it for a week. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. It's been interesting here because my kids go back to school next week. We're on week 7 of the 8-week challenge that is annual challenge that's called Summer Holidays. So I think we're all just chomping at the bit now to get everyone back into a routine, but it's all good. We've been blessed with another nice day here in the background, so if you do have anything left to dry off, I'd recommend getting it out there just now as well. Yeah,
Well, that's one of the problems with Scotland, isn't it? We're about 40 miles apart. It's sunny where you are. It's cloudy and windy where I am. Probably still good drying weather though.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I mean, I think we've done pretty well for the weather, and I'm always happy that this is something that works out during the summer. Summer is never often summer when it's in Scotland. But
indeed.
Hey,
Anyway, Brian, who have we got standing in the wings today?
who have we got standing in the wings today? Well, it's been a bit of a journey for us so far over the first 3 episodes, I guess, with quite a variety of guests and a bit of a change of direction today. And we've got sitting in the background here, and we'll just try and bring him in. We've got Jason Krantz here. Hi there, Jason. How are you? This is your official comms test to make sure that we have you on the stream here.
Hey, Jason.
Gentlemen, it is a pleasure to be here. Are you able to hear me okay? These two guys here.
Oh, yeah, we got you.
Can you hear me?
All
right. Yeah, no, I'm glad to be here and talk some shop and nerd out a little bit with you guys. I'm sure it'll be an exhilarating discussion.
Yeah, we've been excited to have you on, Jason, and even I'm glad that George didn't scare you off with his look yesterday. He almost got me, so it was a pretty close run thing. But look, I guess we're here today to talk a little bit about a world that hopefully we all know a little bit about. I mean, George and I have been a bit out of our depth in a couple of our episodes before, which we try to make it so. But hopefully we've got a good discussion coming along the line on data and analytics. So why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction of who you are, Jason, and how you've came to be and how you've ended up on our show?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Jason Krantz, CEO and founder of Strategy Titan. We're a data and analytics and strategy advisory firm. We basically help companies navigate the journey of realizing the potential of data and analytics. And I say this from a lot of real world experience. As I tell people, I'm not the smartest person in the world. I just like to deploy common sense and I focus on things that actually matters. In the data and analytics world, it's very easy to get caught up in well, it could do this, or the theoretical. Essentially, what business people hear is want. How do I actually get stuff to work? And this is a really key consideration. That's what I found is our differentiator is that, executives and others are just constant blasted with the hype, if you will. We help them cut through the hype. Listen, you want to do a data and analytics platform. Here's where the landmines are going to be at. Here's what's going to happen, right? Because sometimes it's not just about doing a certain block of things, right? I found a lot of times it's about avoiding certain landmines that are likely just explode your initiative. And so perspective comes from a lot of real world experience. In my past, companies would hire me to build greenfield analytics teams. They'd be like, we want to build out a data and analytics capability. We have absolutely nothing. No team, no infrastructure, anything. And they would hire me to build that out. And what I realized is that tools and technology, the easy part. It's actually really easy. Just to speaking in the success equation. What I like are the things that not as many are the most critical components of success, which is usually really culture and these things that don't fit into a nice compartment data and analytics world. Obviously, I like to think I can still hold my own with the best of the technical. Make a conscious choice to avoid those topics because we already have a lot of really smart people talking. We don't need me talking about that.
I think that's like a fascinating intro, Jason, and because we're like at heart, right? George and I were tool guys to begin with, right? So if we were brought into the business, we learned tooling, and that's the first thing that you often lead as you're a practical data practitioner. You learn about tools and what to use and how to use them. And what you're talking about here is strategy, right? But the first thing, that's the first thing I want to ask you is how do you walk that fine line between conversations that start with businesses that all they want to talk about is a tool. So they try and fit a strategy into a tool that they have or a budget that fits because there's a tool that fits the budget. So how do you navigate that kind of conversation to begin with to try and get the right persona of the business on the right areas? How does that work?
Yeah. So one of the things that I like to do is my personality, take it with a grain of salt, but I like to use ridiculous. They stick out. They're memorable. And when you real world situations, it makes the connection and people can see the ridiculous situation. Somebody comes talking about a tool, Power BI, and they're focusing on the tool. And so what I like built in your house or modified your house in any way or form. Most that. I go, are you focusing on being used? Are you interested in the brand paints? Any of that stuff? And they're like, well, no, why would I care about that? Well, you're kind of doing the same thing right now where you're focusing on all the tools. Instead, we need to first step back and say, like, what's your vision for this remodel? What are you trying to do? Where are you trying to go? And what might that look like? Where I use this analogy here, this analogy a lot where you're hearing to get here. What are the components of that? Using the remodel is like your bathroom, you want to get it to here. In the business sense, you want to get it here. And what are those different components that might go into getting you here? Because when we look at it like that, the tools don't matter. Now, the thing is that I find that this approach works because walking people through a process, they're typically conditioned to look at a tool. What I realize, I'm a very firm believer that if you're focusing on tools, you're probably taking the wrong approach. And again, that's just my perspective. People will disagree with that, and to each their own. But I have found that if you've got a great strategy, business strategy, I always start with business strategy. What are you trying to do? And that's really, really important. Because let's walk through a situation, and I'm going to bring it back full circle. Original question, which is tool, but this is context. Is that let's just say you want to grow revenue, okay? Well, that's a big revenue delta. What I always
I don't. Can I just check with George if Jason, are you breaking up just a little bit? George, can you hear me?
We're looking at.
He's breaking just a little bit, Brian.
We're looking at.
Yeah, he's dropping out. So what I'm hearing Jason saying then is we're starting off with a business strategy. Which is underpinning the data and analytics strategy. Let's see if we can get Jason to change his connection.
Everyone hear me? Yeah.
Not greatly, Jason.
All right.
I heard that.
A little bit better. Yeah, a little bit better.
Okay. I'll try. I don't know. I usually never have problems with this. So let me know if you can still hear me or not. What I was getting to is, yes, the cliff note is that when we're looking at this, you've got to look at it from a business lens, because without that, the tools and the approach and all that, the business objective is kind of the thing of all of it. And so with this, what we like to do is position this accordingly with these leaders to say, in their own words, what are they trying to do? And then walk through ways that data and analytics might be able to help them with various projects that are on their growth agenda. And what this does is this helps us anchor our objectives, kind of what we're trying to accomplish, with their objectives. And that creates that linkage between kind of what data analytics is trying to do in the business side. Now, I've drastically oversimplified the process. But the point of this is that if we can get clarity on they're here, they want to hear, here's the things on their objective list that they think are going to get us there. And then we can bring insights as to how data and analytics could actually empower or accelerate those capabilities. Now we've created on why specific tools a good match, because we've created that linkage the whole way through of your objective is grow sales. We can do it through sales analytics. I'm just making something up. Tableau is a tool, or ThoughtSpot or whatever could be a tool to help facilitate different components of that sales growth objective. And so I always start in the reverse of the last thing we look at is tools. I like to work backwards. Start at the end, like talk to them, make that connection, get them to understand, kind of fluff, remove all the hype, remove all the junk, and figure out what actually matters to them. And you do that by actually asking them, listening.
Okay, cool. Yes, Jason. So that kind of I think many times in my history I've been asked to write a data and analytics strategy, and I've multiple. I mean, I can think of in the last 10 years, probably into double figures. Half of them probably sat on a shelf and became shelfware. But the other half, it was sort of it was difficult to know where to start. And I think that point about the analytics strategy underpinning the business strategy. I mean, it's common sense, isn't it? But it's a good. The business has to first of all know what it wants to do before you can start thinking about your data and analytics strategy. That feels like a golden rule.
Well, the one thing that, on LinkedIn, I tell them, and I genuinely believe this, nothing I say is revolutionary. It's not. It's common sense. Mm-hmm. People avoid it because it's almost like it's so simple, it can't work. But the fact it's so simple actually makes it it's vastly more complicated than it sounds. Like that process I just talked about, if you're not savvy in the language of the business, or you don't have that context on on what a CEO might be thinking about or whatever it is, those are very difficult conversations. So while it sounds easy, it's actually pretty darn hard. And again, I just say that because I remember early in my career running the same playbook, and I would fumble things all the time. I didn't know what questions to ask after I got past the first one. I didn't know how to pull the thread to keep the conversation going, right? These are muscles that you build just by kind of going to the plate, and you're going to strike out a couple of times. But that's where I share these ideas to help people get down this path faster. When you're at this level and you're trying to create this data strategy and business strategy and making sure that the data strategy actually drives real results in a practical manner, you've got these conversational skills have to be very refined, because it creates clarity and really expectation management up front. And like one of them, there's a $500 million organization right now we're doing a data strategy for, and like you said, they had somebody else in there and they're trying to boil the ocean. I mean, they're 18 months in and they're just like, we haven't taken any action. I go, all right, here's what we're going to do. What are your most pressing objectives? Sales growth. Okay, great. Let's just start with something simple like a sales analytics platform. Build a sales data warehouse, whatever you want to call it. And I said, let's just get that going, because what it does is it builds momentum. Because remember, this is getting back to the cultural piece. You got this big bang project. People are like, man, what are you guys doing? Where with these pilots and these lighter weight things, we can show the executive team, show the community, just show everyone in the business that, hey, this stuff is working, and build excitement, build tangible result, build things that actually get out there. The Salesforce, we had a sales analytics platform out in a month. Now I give it to the EVP of sales. Hey, how can this help you with your objectives A, B, and C? Again, getting back to the executive stated objectives of A. Like I want to expand geographically. Great. So you got to go out and hunt. Well, guess what? For your sales team, we just freed up 200 hours a month where you're not going to have to do all this reporting and stuff that you have to do anyway. Your time is free now to go hunt. Your time is free now to do all the things that you were actually hired to do. Your time is free to go and actually grow the business. And he's like, yeah, this is it. So now what I do is, okay, great. Now what I need your help in, I need your help building momentum on this initiative in your organization. Marketing, about the power of analytics, and this is a process. It takes time. But we can tell everybody all day about how great data and analytics is. It's 1,000 times more powerful when you've got business people that are living, eating, and breathing it, talking about how the solution and data strategy and all that stuff is. This is an internal effort. If you want to accelerate the rate of these things growing and getting traction, that's the number one thing. That is the number one thing that I have realized in my experience. My success is the internal marketing and sales that come organically from the community. Now, to bring it back to your point on data strategy, we didn't really talk about data a whole lot. We talked about the business. We talked about the implementation and how it makes their lives easier. The data strategy is just a mechanism or a part of the equation to bring that better life into fruition. Because that's really what this is. Nobody cares about data strategy. No business person cares. They care how the data strategy actually makes their life better, easier, and helps them hit their goals. Now, again, I know a lot of people that will disagree with that. They probably have many legitimate points brought up. But if your customer is the business, and you look at that, to your point, my experience, most data strategies end up just collecting dust. You get a huge invoice, you get a really pretty deck, and a great strategy. There's a lot of really great strategies that are collecting all over the world. You have to ask why.
Yeah.
And I think what I talked about just articulates some of the many reasons why.
Yeah.
You go, George. You go.
Yeah. So I think while we're on the why, actually, Jason, that's all really useful, interesting stuff. What I want to know is, does any business benefit from a data and analytics strategy? Then, how small can you go? You talked about there was a £500 million pound company. I've done them for slightly smaller, but I'm just wondering about maybe a 10 or a 20 man business. What's the market like, and what is the benefit of having a data strategy? Can any size of company benefit from a data strategy?
100%. I genuinely believe any size organization could benefit. I actually think the smaller the business, up to a point, the more that they can benefit. The big caveat with this. Now, I will preface this by saying there are certain industries, verticals that we operate in are extremely well entrenched, we'll say. So I'm basing this off of my experience. My experience is skewed because I focus on what I call the dirtier industries, manufacturing, distribution, RV is another one. These are businesses that have been around a long time. You look in the United States, I think it's like 80% of manufacturing businesses are under like 50. And to penetrate those markets, these are companies that don't want to change. I've been operating my business this way for years. I don't need that stuff. And I vehemently disagree with that assessment. I go, if there's anything that you need right now, it's this. think about it from a manufacturing side, and it's in their DNA operationally within their. What capabilities do you have around pipeline management, sales analytics, price management, understanding your markets, those things outside your four walls? But their view of the world is I make stuff. So it's not the way that they think. So I do believe that virtual companies, especially today, can benefit from the data and analytics initiatives for a number of reasons. There's the end output side of it, which is better decision making, faster decision making, greater confidence if it's done right. There's all the other things too, where it's process improvement, it's data quality, system upgrade, right? Kind of all these things that are related, right? You can't really do quality analytics if you don't have good organized data. Or maybe you can, if you've got a magic hat or something. But the thing is that when you embark on that journey, you inherently improve numerous other components of your business. At least that's my belief. And so that is why I do think that many companies can benefit from it, but it comes down to they typically have lack of budget to bring it in-house, or it's a major investment that they're like, we don't really know how to fully leverage those assets. If you're doing a data scientist, I'm just making a number up at $100,000 a year, which would be a cheap data scientist. You're like, why? I can get 2 customer service representatives for that, and I don't really know how I'm going to deploy these resources accordingly. And that's kind of one of the thesis statements that we're saying, you don't need to have this person on staff yet. Build the capability, figure out what you're going to do with it, and then bring that person in. I don't know, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the economics of scale and ROI, right? So if you're a smaller company, you've got to be pretty organized to get together a data strategy. And you're absolutely right. Probably every business could nowadays benefit from a data strategy, but you could also argue that taking micro components out of that strategy and getting involved in things like data literacy or tooling in the short term might benefit a business in something that gives them that tangible benefit. And getting companies to agree to that long-term investment, the smaller they get, the harder that is to do. And you'll probably know that working with the bigger businesses, Jason. But I tend to work more in the SME space, and it's hard to get that really constructive, consultative, long-termist view across when the initial requirement is build me a dashboard. And this is why data strategies end up being formed, is because build me a dashboard turns into any consultant that knows what they're doing will first ask the question, whoa, why do you want to build a dashboard? Well, we want these KPIs. Well, are they really KPIs? Are they your real KPIs? Well, no, I don't know what my KPIs are. So have you got a strategy to work out what that is? No, we don't. And then it just works backwards, doesn't it? So it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, I think, from that perspective. And for me, this is why hearing your view is important, because I haven't been into that many businesses of that scale to say these are the steps that you go through. So to tag on to that little bit, where are the key catch points then once you get into this kind of groove of building a strategy and understanding the business and understanding where the data strategy integrates into that business? Where are the kind of points where you typically see a business go, well, whoa, are we doing the right thing here? And I'm not sure that you mentioned this at the beginning. Where are those kind of sticking points that you see in the process?
Yeah, so I will say that is extremely the commercialization side of it, and I know it's like a nebulous term, but really what I'm looking at when I say that, what I mean by that is I like to focus on revenue drivers. If you can make a revenue driver's life better, easier, help them perform better, it's a really easy path to quantifying financial benefit, getting additional funding. You can actually pretty easily track your impact on the P&L, right? Let's just take pricing analytics. It's a pretty easy path to say, hey, through our pricing analytics, we helped improve, price volume mix, X percent, and that directly drove Y percent increase in EBITDA, earnings before income taxes, depreciation and amortization. It's a financial term. That's one of the key ones that I personally look at. But, I preface that because a lot of companies, they lack clarity in my mind, and they get stuck because they just don't know what levers to pull first to get maximum impact out of their initiatives. And I say this because, they're like, oh, we need a data strategy. Okay, well, great. You've got a great model. You've got a great theoretical model of, well, if we do A, B, and C, okay, how are you going to commercialize that now? How are you going to ingrain that into your strategy? How are you going to implement that on a day in, day out basis and change behavior to drive actual financial results? So, I say that because I've been through this with a lot of businesses, in the tens of billions down to, 100 million. And the problem is the same, is that if you don't have that clarity on what lever you're going to pull first, you could just spend all day just chasing your tail. And so the reason why I gave that preamble prior to that comment is because with the commercialization angle and ease, I say ease, but I always say if you can make sales lives better or easier, you're great. I like to go for sales. Anything sales is trying to do. Sales analytics, price optimization, anything in that boat. Because besides FP&A and finance, which is probably the sales arm, as I mentioned in my previous story, is a great marketing angle in terms of as they succeed, they become the one that helps create the flywheel, the culture flywheel, and get things going. So, with sales is, again, there's the reporting arm that we talked about. That's one that I immediately go towards. If you're not doing any reporting, understanding your sales incentive plans, your budget, kind of all those things, and tracking it, because at least most companies we come across, they're very poor at this. It's kind of like, I think I'm here. Well, why don't we remove that ambiguity and create clarity?
I was just about to say it's a finger in the air thing for a lot of companies, right? Which is still unbelievable that there's a little bit of Excel around it, but nothing in terms of being able to drill around the data to understand why the sales are happening or why they're not happening, more to the point.
Yeah.
And that's just basic analytics. This isn't like really deep, granular data strategy we're talking here. This is the basics. And again, I don't know, Excel paralysis is still a huge thing in our industry. I don't know if you see it, but again, I expect further down the chain that you get towards the SMEs, the middle size and the SME market, the more you see Excel paralysis still being a huge, huge issue at that point as well. And that's a reason just to, think about data strategy in itself as well. Tooling is not always the answer, but I think when I say that, I talk about it in terms of being, geared towards specific tools, right? So before George and I started on our journey with the data mix, we were quite heavily involved with click tooling, but that could have been any tooling, and that would naturally make us biased towards one way or another. And that's what's the hardest thing when you're going into an organization. For those that are keen to have a data strategy, how do you get around those people that are like, okay, we want a data strategy, but we only want to do it with Microsoft, or we only want to do it with Tableau or Alteryx or Power BI or Click. So how do you start to gravitate that conversation away to the right direction of, what, you're asking the wrong questions. You're asking about tooling. What we really want to talk about is how you manage your data from a holistic standpoint.
Yeah, so that is a very real challenge. My first question is usually why? Why are you anchored on that? Yeah. Why is it? It's more out of curiosity. Our favorite tools, right? I have my favorite stack. If I have my pick going with A, B, C, and it's thing to find out some of the drivers. So it'll differ by every situation, but that is, everybody inherently has biases. And the thing is that by asking why on those drivers that are pointing them in that direction, but then we can offer maybe a contrarian position or something that they hadn't thought about. One of my favorite things to do, I love doing it, and I love it when people respectfully disagree. Be like, well, I hear what you're saying about this platform. What about AED&E? You should think about that, because these are situations where that might become a significant hurdle. And so in your roadmap, as you're looking at things, while these do have immediate benefits in this regard, there might not be the future stability that you need in these regards. And so that's just something to keep in mind as investment thesis, and you're going through all these things to think through not only where you're at today, but where are you looking to go in a perfect world? What does it look like in 2 years, 5 years?
Yeah.
What will your technology infrastructure need to look like to meet those demands? And we don't always know that, but it's a good thought exercise, because we've got a client right now where they were like, cool. And it's, you might want to consider why for your needs because of A, B, and C. They're looking at it now, but that is hard. That's really, I don't know. What do you guys do in those situations?
I mean, I have had these situations, and quite often what I'll say to a client is, well, you're paying me as the expert to come up with a solution. It almost, and I'll be a little bit more diplomatic than this, but it almost feels if they've already chosen the stack, they've chosen the technologies, well, they've kind of chosen the solution. So what they've said is, here's a solution, and there's not a lot for me to do at that level. Often it's better if they just come with the problem. And actually within a strategy, I do not always, I might be doing this wrong, but I do not always put down what the solution is. We'll talk about this, what the strategy with data is, what the strategy with visualization, who's going to get access to it, what they're going to do with this data. And then comes this sort of technical solution at the end. That's where you put it into the hands of maybe a few vendors to say, okay, here's our strategy. Here's what we want to do. Bring me a solution and bring me a price for that solution, and how you're going to maintain it. And then we do an options analysis and come up with something at the end of that. But to actually come up with a stack. I mean, of course, Brian and I are always going to be wedded to Click. That's what we started with. So I always smile. I'm always happy when a solution includes Click as part of the stack. But that's not always the right answer. We accept that.
Yeah, to that point, we've got somebody we're working with right now where I'm biased towards Tableau. I love it. You partner with other things like Mapbox. It's very powerful. And so we have a client where we were initially going like a Tableau route. And then as we rethought it, we're like, whoa. That's way too much for what we need. A simple Excel file with like a remote connectivity will give people, because our end user was somebody, it like the Tableau platform introduced a ton of friction. It's another login. It just adds no value to kind of the process that the customer needed. I defaulted towards that because I was like, oh, that's it. And then as I step back, I'm like, wait, a customer service representative doesn't need Tableau. They need something that's really quick. They got a customer on the phone now. You think if you got an angry customer, they're like, hold on, let me log into Tableau, or let me go find that report. No, like I want an answer now. This is where it's like repositioning to like, who is the client? Who is the customer? Like in terms of who's the actual consumer and what is their world like? And that's where, again, stuff gets over-engineered or oversold. And sometimes something as simple as an Excel file, people can laugh at it all they want. Sometimes that's all you need. Sometimes it's that simple. Or you use that as a proof of concept. You get it up and you get it going, and then you learn from that, you iterate, and then you can create more refined things. But then you've earned the trust with those people, so they're more likely to gravitate towards your new solution. They trust you. They're like, oh, it's actually something that adds value. I know what I'm getting with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I do apologise. I just had to jump out. I think we had a bit of a technical issue with our stream landing on LinkedIn, so I've just been subtly redirecting to our YouTube stream on LinkedIn. But we'll get the full video out there after the fact, Jason, so nothing will be missed for our LinkedIn audience. But I think that's fascinating stuff, and it's amazing the intrinsic links when you look at the different depths and granularities of this type of strategy that you're looking at. And I know one of the things that we talked about before the call about is like where you find inspiration for these things. So the first thing I wanted to ask about was like failing fast, right? That's a thing in implementation, but it must be a thing in strategy as well, because I've been in a few strategy situations where I've been given a remit and said, build a strategy and come back in 2 weeks with a strategy for that, right? So typically that kind of, go away and deal with it, that waterfall model doesn't really work too well. And obviously the world is leaning more towards agile and being able to do all these things on demand and more interactively. So that's first one I want to pose you is how do you see how interactive is the processes that you have with the business, and how do you kind of physically checkpoint with the business?
Yeah.
Is it a workshop thing, that kind of thing? So I'll pose that to you first, and then I'll come back to you with a second one if that's okay.
In the beginning, it's a very, very high touch experience, for lack of a better word, because at least for me, I'm sitting with the business leaders, and that's where, again, all of this is anchored on where you're trying to go and how can this stuff help. So it is very high touch in the beginning to create that clarity, to set expectations accordingly. The expectation management, I think, is really important up front, because if you're expecting A and you get B, you might not be happy with it. And so it's just saying, like, hey, here's realistically what the journey looks like. Here's a realistic timeline. And especially as you get people that maybe want more advanced things, like they just come in spouting, not even really understanding what it is, AI and machine learning. And it's like, oh, okay, I understand you want that, but why? What are you looking for? Maybe they read an article and they're all jazzed up about it. And it's like, it's one of those where you want to create that clarity up front. And so, as you look at this, it can be challenging because, and I know it seems tangential, but the expectation management is a pretty big part of this too, because for so many people, it's new. So they don't know what to expect. They think they do a lot of times, but a lot of times they're coming to people like us to help coach them down this avenue. So it's one of those that we do spend a lot of time up front and kind of like, okay, I hear you want to do A, B, and C. This is likely what it's going to look like. We would recommend we start with A, and then we progress to B, and then we progress to C, and here's why we sequence it like that. But kind of as you said, is that building in the idea that we want to mitigate as much risk as possible. And we do that by getting clarity on the objectives and then aligning initiatives towards those objectives. But then one of the best ways to get the I guess that clarity and alignment is to get the business aligned too, right? That mitigates a lot of risk, because as we all know, strategy is one part, creating the tool is one part, but really rubber hits the road with the implementation, right? And having this stuff actually get used on a regular basis. And so that's a very major risk factor. So the risk factor of that is making sure that we have a plan to socialize this and align with the business, so that they're aware of what's going on. They're aware of what's coming down the pike. They're aware of how this is actually going to make their lives better, because change is hard. Change is really hard. So what if we could socialize it, we can mitigate a lot of that risk and maybe even bring some people into it. You're always going to have people that don't want anything to do with it. The whole point of all of this is that this is part of the broader risk strategy, right? You're making this big investment, and that if you're going to fail, you want to have some insights as to likely reasons why you're going to fail. And this is kind of, as we talked about, where the landmines at. That's one of the landmines, is saying, hey, if you don't address this is a very significant risk factor, not for a technical reason, it's for an implementation reason. And here's how that will likely unfold. And again, this is stuff I'm sure you guys probably have had similar experiences, but I've lived it. And like, one of my unique lenses from doing this for big companies is I had to come up with a strategy, but I also had to implement and live with my strategy years after it's done. Big difference than when you create a strategy and you hand it off and you're like, good luck, right? So I learned, man, I missed the mark on that, or, oh, I missed the mark on that. And I see you guys smiling, but we have it all the time where it's like, tons of consultancies are like, here's your strategy, go implement. Well, that's where we kind of come with this angle of saying, hey, you're going to need a partner on this, and you're going to need some guidance, because the strategy is the easy part. It really is. And again, people will disagree with that. That's fine. I've lived it. I know. I'm not saying I know everything, but I've learned a lot. And again, getting back to what not to do. So the what not to do is, don't create a strategy, solution, and tools without kind of that people plan and the communication plan, because that's the most important part to me.
Yeah, I think That is, I think I even wrote that in one of my pre-posts before the show, Jason, is writing the data strategy the easy part, because it's easy to take a bunch of theory, put it down on
Sure.
paper, change some X's for the company names and say, this is your data strategy, here we go. But it's a
Yep.
whole different ballgame if you are the person that, as you say, are on the receiving end of that strategy, some data consultant internally or head of data or chief data officer. I'm sure Scott Taylor, the data whisperer, would have a different name for him as well. But
Yeah.
I think, basically that handover point is crucial, and having that continuity, that not just having the data strategy in hand, but the methodology to be able to implement it. And I think that is a key thing, right? And in terms of, that's another thing I wanted to touch on as well, was in terms of where do businesses like come up with their ideas for data strategy? So you must at times meet businesses that have been like, oh yeah, we see that company B have done this amazing job with data strategy, so can we just pick up and copy that and apply it to us, even though we're in a different vertical, a different industry, a different growth part of the business, or on a different timeline. So where do you see those external influencing factors coming from? Where do those typically jut in when you're trying to go through this process?
Yeah, so with that, that's always interesting, because I like those situations, because it means they're in a place where they're receptive to the idea, right? It's like the movie. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Inception, but where they're planting ideas so people are receptive to certain things, and it's the same concept. Whereas, like, to me, it's like, that's great. Tell me about it. What do you see there? What do you like? What are the applications? Kind of talking through it, because now we're not convincing them, having to convince them. They're there. They just need help kind of walking down that path. The analogy I use is, we're like the flashlight on the path. We can help guide them down the right path there. So I actually like those situations. Now, much like you guys, our job is to help people kind of weed through all that stuff to say, okay, we hear what you're saying. Walk us through in more detail how it's going to help you get from A to B. Again, getting back to that central theme of this, because I see this a lot, where a CEO goes to a conference and they come back and they're all hyped up about something, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And it's just, you're like, let's go. Let's do it. I go, okay, well, pump the brakes, because I'm a big believer. Yeah, I could go and make that sale right away, but I want you to actually be happy with the result, and not look back a year later and be like, oh man, that was a bad decision, So we like to say, okay, great, tell me about it. Like, and then basically what we do is, again, the line of questioning, to have them walk through in their own words, really important, their own words, how it's going to help. And if they can't articulate that, I push back and be like, I hear what you're saying, but it would suggest, based on what the lack of clarity here, that maybe you're not ready for that, or we got to flesh this out a little bit more. Because my take is, first and foremost, we're advisors. We're not here to sell a project. We're here to advise. And so sometimes the advisory part is, we actually need to prevent you from doing certain things. I know that sounds very counterintuitive. It's the way I run the business. So, but it's one of those that getting them to articulate in their own words, and that's really important. It's a little mind hack, if you will, that I use across all things, is I get people to talk about things, say it in their own words, and then I use that as a reference point to come back and be like, well, you said, and you said this, and you said this, and then because it was their own words, they're anchored on it. It's not my words. I'm just simply rehashing. What I found is that is an extreme shortcut to getting clarity on a number of different topics and creating alignment, or if there is going to be disagreement, to disagree respectfully in the spirit of getting clarity on what we want to do to move forward. With that.
I think that word you use, respect, is so important, because the worst thing, like as a business, is when you have a consultant come in and they talk at you, and they don't work with you, they talk at you, and then you get the opinions, you try to give your opinion, and it's sort of like, yeah, we accept your opinion, but we're still going to do what we want to do anyway, right? Because we're the experts and you're not. That's why you hired us. And I think that's where you just can't get away with that in the market nowadays, especially with social media. There, you'll just be outed, and before you know it, you'll be on a data show, and your story will be being told to the world. But it is a real thing, I think, and I think that's an interesting niche that you found with your business. If you've done that, if you can combine the fact that you can go in and help implement the data strategy as well as taking the right amount of feedback from the client, because that failing first and understanding that the client will have inspirational ideas as they go through, and they'll want to have those incorporated. And usually those will happen about 80% of the way through the build of the strategy, right? They never happen at the beginning. They come out of the workshops, and they come out of the meetings, and they come out of the phone calls, because nobody knows what they want right at the beginning. And we see it all the time in the implementation sector. So I can't believe that it's really any different when it comes to that kind of strategic standpoint. So what are your views on that, Jason? Does that sound accurate compared to what you?
It is just one of the things I like a non-technical approach. I like a very practical. Listen, this is the reality of the situation, right? Those are the people that I want to work with. If you want a bunch of buzzwords and things like that, we're not gonna work together well. But the thing is, I tell every client that we work with, and anybody even in the business world when I was in corporate America, listen, and I say this, and I genuinely mean this. I don't know everything. I really don't. This world is so big. Just this realm of data and analytics and strategy is so big. It's so complicated. It's constantly evolving. You can't possibly know everything. But again, I got a lot of battle scars, and I can tell you how to navigate this battlefield to avoid bad situations. And sometimes success isn't about doing everything right. It's about not getting a couple key things wrong, meaning, like I said, the socialization component of that internally, it's a really big deal. Another ridiculous analogy that I use with people, I'll ask them, do you have any kids? And, frequently it'll be, yeah. I'll be like, you know what, like when I was getting ready to have a kid, I don't know if you had this, we were reading books, we were doing all the stuff about what the kid's going to do and all the stuff. And then the kid came along. And the problem was the kid didn't read the book. So he didn't know what he was supposed to do. And the thing is as ridiculous as that sounds, before that kid is in your arms, you think you know what you're going to do. We got this. The reality of that situation, when that kid is there, totally different. And I go, this is part of the expectation management process, being like, we're going to go through the data strategy. Everybody's going to feel great. We got this, right? Then you're going to implement. And you're going to find out that this game is way different than your setup. Like you think it's going to be smooth sailing. We're just going to go A, B, C, D, E. The game doesn't work like that. It's different. Much like having a child. The game is not what you expect it to be on that first one. And it sounds ridiculous. But again, that gets to the theme of that. It's just letting people know the reality of this, because guys, as you know, data and analytics is typically part of a broader transformational initiative. And that's the thing, is that the reason why you hear me harping on this topic so much is because it's not a siloed thing. There's usually, as we talked about before, process improvement, all this other stuff that goes with it. That's really hard. That changes a business at its foundation. And that's very uncomfortable. So if you are not ready for that, it's already a hard enough experience. But if you're not really mentally ready and culturally ready for that, you really increase your risk factor in this. And so that's why you hear me keep harping on these topics over and over and over, because I am convinced they are, from living it multiple times, like real world implementing this stuff, that's where success is made in these situations. And that's where, again, I look at it as a majority of my effort as a leader is to educate leaders on the journey that they're about to embark upon. Not the technical details and all that stuff. Again, that's valuable, but that's not where success is made. It's all these other things, because that's how, to get back to the theme, that's how you move from here to here. It's all this soft work that we're talking about. That's where the magic happens.
Yeah. And there was one key word that you used there, Jason, that I think is really important, and that is journey. Because I guess these things, once your strategy is written, you can't, and say all of your C-suite, your executives have signed off on it, and you're away doing the implementation. It can't then just become a document in stone. I guess you have to keep revisiting that, keep tweaking it, keep turning it, depending on how the market's going, depending on how the business is moving. Then you're going to have to make some adjustments to that strategy. Is that correct?
Yeah. I again, I always joke the deliverable of the data strategy. I'm like, this is version 1. We're going to get to version 2 pretty quick. So it's a straw man. So it's a general guideline of where we're going to go. Because to your point, you're going to discover things. You're going to reprioritize all of that. Everything I totally agree with. So I think it's wise to kind of bake that into your process. And again, the expectation management. Guys, this strategy might be different 3 months, 6 months, heck, a month might be different. But we got to be ready for that mentally.
I think, one of the posts that you had a couple of weeks ago, Jason, really resonated with me, and it was about Giannis and the Bucks and how they made their way to the NBA Finals, and how Giannis has pretty much been the same physical player for the last 5 years, right? But this was the year that the Bucks broke through the ceiling to actually make the NBA Finals, and it's because he learned how to harness what he had and make it work with what he has around him, and that's a valuable lesson, that he didn't necessarily become better. He's always been a freak that can't shoot 3-pointers or free throws. He's not improved those parts of his game, but what he has done is understood the intangibles that make his team better. And I think the things that strikes a note with in terms of the strategy side of things as well is that you have to understand the fundamental blocks that you have are not going to change. So it's about being able to adapt and about being able to put those things in the best place that they can be. Because you're not aiming, any strategy is not aiming for 100%, right? If it hits 80 or 90, you're doing an incredible job. If it hits 60 or 70%, you've done pretty well if you're achieving that strategy to that kind of verbosity. So I think it's a big lesson for us all. And I draw a lot of inspiration from my links with the NBA and my love of the NBA. I look at players from there every day and see how, ordinary players turn into championship winners and absolutely undroppable, cornerstones of franchises. And I just think it's just such a relevant comparison to the types of things that we talk about here.
Yeah, to your point is that's what this is about. Is a lot of this is the space, the space here. It's again, to get back to that theme of. It's not tools and tech. Tools and tech are table stakes. You need that to do this, but success is really made in the space in here, specifically in the leadership ranks and how you do this. The thing is that the reason why I talk about what I do is because, again, I just see that a lot of people talking about these topics, right? The Gartner report, which I know Sydney Allison brought up that there's problems with this report, but let's just run with it. Let's just say a majority of projects don't deliver on their promised value, right? That's expectation management. And two, I think it's related to a lot of the components that we're talking about here, because the tools and tech are great. They're phenomenal. They're outstanding. But they don't get used, or they don't meet a practical business need or whatever it is. So the reason why I focus on this stuff is because what I'm thinking is that if we can just recalibrate, we got an amazing worldwide immense capabilities, but kind of like your athletic talent, they're misdirected. If we can refocus them, same core talent, right? Much like the physical attributes of the basketball players, they've got it, but the focus is, and so if they can hone that part. Now you're creating solutions and applications that are game changers. You're changing the way businesses are run. You're making people's lives better. You're doing it in a way that actually resonates with people, and I get how what you created helps make my life better. So to your point on the sport analogy, I think that's a perfect analogy of where we're at in kind of the data and analytics community in general. That's a broad brushstroke. I understand that, but that linkage, that was really kind of part of the inspiration for sharing that, is because it's good career advice, but I also felt too it's good life advice.
Yeah. That reminds me of the film that I watched. I think it was Moneyball. It was a baseball. It was a baseball game, and I think it's about 20 years old. And it was a story about a team using exactly the same players, but they brought analytics into it. And I think if you're looking then for an analogy as to, okay, I have a business, but what is a data and analytics strategy going to do to improve my business? Then there you have it. You use exactly what you have, the same staff, the same product within your business, but you can do it better by bringing in data and analytics.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that from this. That clicked on this. On this session.
Well, I love it's a great movie, and I love Brad Pitt too.
Yeah,
and it's like it's a classic view that has parallels in terms of, again, if you hone in a little bit towards business intelligence rather than data, how the paradigm of business intelligence or data and analytics, or however it's framed in your organization, is so different to the way it was even 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, even like dashboard delivery used to be what business intelligence meant. It used to be dashboards, and now you think about all of the pieces around that in terms of governance and sucking in the data at one end and being able to blend and bring in workspaces at the other end to be able to do workflows at the other end to do other stuff. It's not just a case of take your data, process it, and put it on a dashboard. And I suppose that's what makes the data and analytics strategy proposition so evolving and so interesting to be a part of, is that it's forever having new angles added to it. And we don't necessarily know what those are 2, 5, 10 years down the line. So I think that's what's incredibly interesting to be part of, is that an analytics strategy that could be written in the past for the next 5 years now has to have quite a lot of touch points in the future to be able to refine it and move it into the right spaces as things develop.
Mm-hmm. I think, the one thing is that even with all this change, I'm willing to bet, I'm betting my career on it, that many of the fundamentals we've talked about today are going to be the same. Because technology changes very quickly. People are pretty consistent. The human race is the way our minds work. It's remarkably consistent. And so, even with all this change, I think that's why I think anchoring on these fundamentals, they transcend technology. I think that they have a lot of durability. And the thing is perhaps more importantly for those people that are in the data and analytics space, they become sustainable competitive differentiators if you do them right, because so few people do them well. And this is what I tell anybody I work with. If you nail this stuff, do whatever you want. You will literally be able to do whatever you want. So that's just a short piece of career advice, because I know a lot of people, I say this from experience, people, we talked about it beforehand, people will hear some of the stuff that I say, and I acknowledge, I go, listen, I understand that this makes zero sense. It sounds dumb to you right now. But in 5 years, 10 years, you're going to realize, actually, that makes a lot of sense. It's just, and I was there. I had people that were giving me advice. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This makes no sense. And then I like one of my mentors, I grabbed lunch and we're like, all that stuff you told me, it makes sense now. I encourage people to work on building these muscles because they take time. It's not like a technical, this is a mindset. And the reps that you need to kind of practice these things, they don't come along as often. So I encourage people to work on building these mental muscles and this mindset now, because it does take years. It's not like learning Python or R or something like that, where you can just hammer on a keyboard in a dark room for hours on end and get pretty proficient at it pretty quickly. These things take time. And again, I say this with a lot of confidence. If you start today, 2 to 3 years, maybe you'll be decent at it. Because again, you just don't get as many opportunities to practice,
Yeah. And it's like that meme, isn't it, where it takes you get to a point in your career where it takes you 5 minutes to fix something proverbially, but it's not the 5 minutes that costs the big fee. It's about knowing which button to push during those 5 minutes and at the right time. And I think that's the thing that we're all aiming for in terms of strategy implementation and everything. So I think that's a great way to close off. I just see that we're kind of rounded out on the hour now. George, have you got any kind of closing points that you'd like to make, just to kind of sum up the session here?
I've learned a lot here, Jason, this afternoon. I think some of these nuggets will stay with me for a long time. Keys for me now is the business guides the strategy, and the data and analytics strategy. We talked a little bit about actually understanding the problem before you come up with a solution. And I think also what we're saying here is that the dashboards now are really the last mile of your data and analytics strategy overall. So yeah, things have changed in the sort of 10 plus years that Brian and I have been doing this.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you guys, thanks for having me on. Thanks for letting me chat with your community, and yeah, hopefully we provided some value.
Yeah, you're absolutely welcome, Jason, and I can tell you that value has been provided.
Oh yeah.
I think it's been a great session, and I just want to sort of posthumously apologise to our LinkedIn viewers, who I believe we've had a few technical issues there, but we will get the recording rolled out, so we'll get this out to our audience one way or another. And thank you for those hardy ones who managed to make the switch to YouTube based on my messaging in the thread. But look, it's been another fantastic episode of the Data Mix. We've really enjoyed it as a way to kind of round off our Friday afternoon. We don't have our next guest lined up yet, but you can be bet that we'll still be around in our kind of 2 to 3 week cadence, and we'll let you know about that as soon as it happens and it goes live. So it just remains really for us to say thanks again to Jason Krantz, CEO of Strategy Titan, for another brilliant education to lead into the weekend. It's been awesome. So thank you to you, George. Thank you to you, Jason. And we look forward to seeing you for episode 5 of the Data Mix when we launch in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much, guys. Have a brilliant weekend.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, gentlemen.